In a peaceful village called Zalika, there lived a woman named Adana. She was known for her beauty and kindness. Her hands wove beautiful fabrics, creating patterns that told stories of her ancestors. The villagers loved her for her warmth and grace. Her husband, Kwame, was a charming man in his early 30s. He traded goods and was well liked by the people of the village. But Kwame began to feel restless. He longed for the excitement of the city, for something bigger than the simple life in the village. He started talking more and more about Lumumba City, a bustling metropolis far away. He dreamed of wealth, modern life, and the fast pace of the city, while Adana remained happy and content in the village, tied to her traditions. Kwame's longing for the city grew stronger, and his attention began to shift away from Adana. He spent more time talking about the city and the new people he had met there. One of them was Nia, a beautiful, confident woman who represented everything Kwame now wanted in life: independence and modernity. She was slim and glamorous, the complete opposite of Adana's fuller, grounded figure. Nia often made fun of the village, calling it old-fashioned. To Kwame, she seemed like a breath of fresh air, and the more he spent time with her, the more he compared her to Adana. Kwame started to criticize Adana's body, telling her that men in the city wanted women who were like the wind, slim and graceful, not like the earth, which he said she resembled. His words hurt her deeply, making her feel self-conscious and unwanted. Adana, once proud of her appearance, began to doubt herself. As Kwame's affection for Nia grew, he became more distant. He stopped caring about Adana, and she began to feel the pain of being left behind. The love they once shared seemed to fade away with every passing day. Eventually, the inevitable happened. Kwame told Adana he wanted a divorce. He said she no longer fit the life he wanted. He had changed, and she hadn't. He told her she was too tied to the village and her traditions for him. His words cut through Adana like a sharp knife. She couldn't understand how the man she loved had become so cold and distant. Her heart shattered as she realized he was no longer the man she had married. Devastated, Adana went to the baobab tree in their yard, the place where they had once made promises to each other. She sat beneath it, alone, and in a moment of overwhelming sorrow, she burned her wedding cloth, symbolizing the end of their marriage. As the cloth burned, the smoke rose into the air, and something beautiful happened. The fire turned into glowing fireflies that floated into the night sky, symbolizing the presence of her ancestors watching over her. In that moment, Adana realized she wasn't truly alone. Her ancestors, her traditions, and her strength were always with her. Though the pain of the divorce was heavy, she understood that her roots ran deep, and no matter how much Kwame had changed, she would always be connected to something bigger than herself. The journey of healing was just beginning, but Adana now knew she had the strength to move forward. Days passed, and Adana became a shadow of the woman she once was. The lively, warm smile that had once brightened the village was gone. She no longer wove beautiful fabrics, and her loom, once a symbol of her pride, sat untouched, gathering dust in the corner of her hut. The villagers whispered when they saw her, shaking their heads with pity. Some tried to comfort her, but she barely responded. She moved through the village like a ghost, her eyes empty, her heart heavy. One evening, unable to bear the pain any longer, Adana walked to the river. The water shimmered under the moonlight, its surface calm and endless. She knelt by the edge, staring at her reflection. The woman who looked back at her was not the Adana she remembered. She was broken, lost. A tear slipped down her cheek and disappeared into the water. She thought about stepping in, letting the river wash away her sorrow. But before she could, a voice called out from the darkness, "Young one, do not let sorrow make you forget who you are." Startled, Adana turned and saw Mama Ifua, the village elder. Mama Ifua was known for her strange ways, her deep wisdom, and the secrets she carried. Her eyes, old yet sharp, held stories no one could fully understand. She walked slowly towards Adana, her wooden staff tapping against the ground. She bent down and picked up a kola nut, tossing it into the river. It made a small splash before sinking. "Even the nut must break to release its sweetness," Mama Ifua said, watching Adana closely. "Will you crack open, child?" Adana frowned. "I don't understand." Mama Ifua smiled, her face full of mystery. "You will." She turned and began walking away. Something inside Adana told her to follow. They walked deep into the forest, where the trees whispered with the voices of ancestors. The air felt thick with power. Mama Efua led Adana to a sacred grove, a place few had ever seen. The moonlight filtered through the leaves, casting strange shadows on the ground. Mama Efua placed her hands on Adana's shoulders and looked into her eyes. "Tonight, you will see what has been waiting for you." That night, Adana dreamed. In her dream, she stood before a council of women, dressed in royal fabrics of gold and indigo. They were her ancestors. Their voices were strong, yet gentle. "Carry our pride to the world," they said. "Do not let sorrow make you small. You are more than a man's choice. You are a daughter of the earth, woven from strength and grace." When Adana woke, she felt different. The sadness in her heart had not disappeared, but something new was there. A spark, a purpose. Beside her, a wooden trunk sat, filled with the most beautiful fabrics she had ever seen. Mama Efua smiled. "Now, we begin." Adana's training started the next morning. Mama Efua was strict, pushing her to do things she had never imagined. She placed a jug of water on Adana's head and made her walk through the village without letting it fall. "Grace," she said, "a queen does not stumble." Adana learned to weave again, but this time she combined her traditional patterns with new, bold designs. She stitched gowns that blended the wisdom of her ancestors with the beauty of the modern world. Slowly, she began to embrace herself again. At the village festival, she danced with a confidence that stunned everyone. Her body, once a source of shame in Kwame's eyes, moved with power and pride. The villagers gasped, mesmerized by her transformation. And then, something unexpected happened. A visitor from Lumumba City had been recording the festival. The video of Adana's dance, her dress flowing like golden flames, spread like wildfire. Days later, she received an invitation. Lumumba City's Fashion Week wanted her. She stepped into the city wearing a dress unlike any other, a gown of gold and indigo, its patterns resembling leopard spots, a symbol of ambition, of resilience, of survival. As she walked through the glittering streets of Lumumba, she saw Nia in the distance, her lips curling in amusement. "Look at her," Nia whispered to Kwame, who stood beside her. "A village girl pretending to be one of us." But Kwame did not respond. His eyes were fixed on Adana, and for the first time, there was something in them that had never been there before. Regret. The night of Lumumba City Fashion Week was electric. Cameras flashed, voices buzzed, and the air smelled of expensive perfumes and ambition. Backstage, models rushed to get ready, assistants adjusted outfits, and designers whispered last-minute instructions. Adana stood in front of a mirror, dressed in a masterpiece she had poured her soul into. A gown woven from golden and indigo fabric, the patterns whispering of her ancestors. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. This was her chance. But Nia had other plans. As Adana turned to grab her shoes, Nia slipped behind her and yanked a hidden thread on the dress's back seam. The delicate fabric tore slightly, just enough to unravel under the runway lights. Nia smirked and walked away, her heels clicking against the floor. Moments before stepping on stage, Adana felt the fabric loosen. Panic shot through her, but she refused to fall apart. She grabbed a needle and thread, her fingers moving like lightning. Instead of fixing the tear, she transformed it, adjusting the neckline into a daring off-shoulder design. A risk, but one she had to take. Then, the music started. With her head high and shoulders squared, Adana stepped onto the runway. The moment she walked, the room fell silent. The golden fabric shimmered under the lights, flowing around her like fire. She was fierce, untamed, a golden leopard moving through the jungle of high fashion. The cameras loved her. Photographers shouted, "Who is she?" Voices murmured, "The golden leopard has arrived." The audience rose in applause, drowning in her presence. Backstage, Nia clenched her fists. Her plan had failed. In the crowd, Kwame watched in stunned silence. The woman he once dismissed, the woman he thought would crumble without him, was now a force beyond his reach. His stomach twisted. He had thrown away gold for stones. But this was only the beginning of his downfall. After Fashion Week, Adana's face was everywhere. Billboards, magazines, social media. Meanwhile, Kwame's life began to collapse. His business, once thriving, crumbled under his greed. He had alienated his investors, burned bridges with partners, and now, one by one, they abandoned him. Money dried up, deals fell apart, and then came the final blow. Naya, who had once flaunted him like a trophy, walked away. "I don't stay with losers," she said, her voice like ice. Kwame wandered the city, lost. Everywhere he turned, he saw Adana. Her face glowed from billboards, her name echoed in conversations. She was a legend rising, and he was a man drowning in his own mistakes. That night, a storm hit Lumumba. Rain poured from the sky, flooding the streets, drenching Kwame as he walked aimlessly. The storm mirrored his regret. Wild, unforgiving, inescapable. But while Kwame fell, Adana soared. She returned to Zalika, no longer just a village girl, but a global icon. The people greeted her with joy, their voices full of pride. But Adana had not come to bask in fame. She had come to give back. She rebuilt the village school, making it stronger, bigger, a place where young girls could learn not just to weave fabric, but to weave their own futures. Under the ancient baobab tree, she sat with them, guiding their hands, sharing stories of strength and survival. One evening, Kwame returned. His fine clothes were gone, replaced by the simple robes of a man who had lost everything. He stood before Adana, shame weighing on him. "Forgive me," he whispered. His voice cracked, his eyes desperate. Adana looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled. Not with bitterness, not with triumph, but with wisdom. "You traded roots for dust," she said softly. "Plant anew." She did not take him back. She did not give him what he wanted, but she gave him what he needed, a lesson. As Kwame turned and walked away, Adana returned to the baobab, her heart light. The tree's branches stretched wide, sheltering the young girls who wove their dreams beneath it. And beneath its shade, the golden leopard continued to rise,